Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to Bookmas Day 11. Today we are going to talk about some of my favorite reads this year, but we're going to do it in a little bit of a different format than my usual 10 best reads of the year. We are actually going to do the Jaime Choice Awards today. So we're basically going to go through this the same way the Goodreads Choice Awards are formatted, but instead of going over the Goodreads Choice Awards, we're going to go over all of my picks for each genre category. And so for the pool of books we're selecting from, instead of just new books that came out this year, we're going to be selecting from all of the books that I read this year, which at this point is actually 152 books that I read so far in the year of 2025. I've also been trying to think of the best way to present this end of the year wrap up content, because I feel like a lot of it can feel repetitive, especially since we'll be going over my favorite books of the year. If you guys have been following me, you've probably seen me talk about these books throughout the year in reading vlogs, in wrap ups, etc. So instead of going through my usual summary and regular review, we're going to go through maybe a quick summary of each book that we talk about today, but then we're going to focus on highlighting what the book actually did for me, how these books shaped my reading experience this year and how these books changed me for good, because yes, I am still thinking about Wicked. So just a little twist on doing this sort of a yearly recap. I'm also, yes, I'm holding my pink mic today because I just feel like these are my awards, I am the presenter of the awards today and I deserve to hold a mic for fun. So let's just get into it. We're going to do a little bit of an around the library, around the room as we go through the genres. So let's start with fiction. Okay, we didn't actually have to move around that much for fiction because my fiction bookshelves are right here. They're kind of more all over the room, but to go through my top 3 fiction reads, I guess we'll do third place to first place. In third place, I don't know if this book actually counts as just pure fiction. It's more of a classic, but there's no classic category in the Goodreads Choice Awards, but I'm giving this to Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I can't believe I haven't read this book until this year, but this has just been a story that I've loved for so long, and it's about time that I actually read the source material. So I did read this. My copy of this story, though, actually only covers really the first half of the story, which I didn't realize until I put it on my TBR, and a lot of you guys were familiar with this edition, and you guys told me that this didn't cover the whole story, but still, even reading half of the story gave me such cozy vibes. And I think what this book taught me is that I can still enjoy a nice, good, cozy classic that I already know the story of. I think just recently in the past few years, a lot of the classics I've been trying to read haven't been hitting as hard. I think I've been having a 50-50 chance of whether I enjoy a classic or not in the past few years. So I honestly think I started to lose steam in terms of my motivation of continuing to read classics, but this one brought me back up. It was just so cozy. I loved reading about these characters that I already love, and I'll have to track down part 2 at some point so I can actually finish the story. But I love Little Women. I don't think I need to give a synopsis for this one. I think most of us know the story of this. Another top fiction read of mine was actually The Favorites by Layne Fargo. Now this book was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards in the romance category. I absolutely do not agree with that. I don't think this book is a romance at all. It should not be read as a romance. If you don't know what The Favorites is, it's essentially a reimagining of Wuthering Heights. And I also read Wuthering Heights this year. I don't think Wuthering Heights is romantic at all, and I don't think this book is romantic at all. So quick synopsis, The Favorites pretty much follows these two childhood friends. They were always bonded as kids, but then they went into figure skating together, and we just follow their entire story from when they were kids to when they discovered figure skating, to their training, to making their way up through the ranks, through going to competition, getting into fights, getting back together, and all that. It's a very exciting but very toxic story about these two characters. And I had the time of my life reading this. I think what this book taught me was that I am able to read a story with such unlikable characters but still enjoy it. I think this book in particular really surprised me, because if you were to read this as a romance, there are a lot of romance tropes that I would hate, that I would despise in a romance book, but because this was more of a dramatic fiction novel to me, I actually really enjoyed it, even though this book had so many of these tropes that I normally really despise. I really enjoyed The Favorites, kept me on my toes the entire time. This is one of those books that makes you want to just throw it at the wall multiple times throughout the story, but in the most fun way. And then my personal winner for the fiction category has to be, oh my gosh, where is it? It's over here. It has to be The Favorites by Fredrik Backman, one of my favorite authors of all time at this point, an author that I actually didn't discover until this year. But in this one, we essentially follow a very unlikely friendship. We start off the story with Louisa, who is on the brink of turning 18, and her entire childhood she's sort of been passed from foster family to foster family, so she hasn't had the smoothest childhood. She has a fascination with this certain painting, and so she goes to an exhibit where this painting is being showed because she just wants to look at it, but she gets caught sort of like trespassing into this art exhibit that she didn't really like get invited to. She doesn't really belong there. And then this kickstarts the story of her as she, in this sort of unlikely scenario, starts to uncover more of the background behind this painting that she really, really loves. I mean, Fredrik Backman has just changed my life in so many ways this year for good. Every single book I read from him teaches me more about the human experiences, and I think I just learn a lot about humanity in his books. I love the way he does unlikely friendships. This one is such a strong one, and I think I've discovered my joy of reading humorous books that feel a little bit silly sometimes, but then also will dig deep at your heart or into your heart. He has truly mastered the balance of that, especially in this book, and he's truly just given me so much this year. I read 6 of his books this year, so yeah, I've learned a lot about the human experience through him. Okay, very similar angle for this next genre, but historical fiction is next. So in my third place, I have Homeseeking by Karissa Chen. This is a very subtle but heartwarming story about 2 characters who grew up together in Shanghai. They became childhood friends. They became maybe a little bit something more potentially, but then one of them, Wen, one day abruptly enlisted into the military, and then our protagonist, Suchi, never saw him again after that. It's now been, I think it's like 50 or 60 years later at this point. They actually run into each other at like a fruit market in the middle of LA, like very, very randomly. And as they see each other, like, you know, from across the fruit market, all of these memories start coming up. They reconnect. They start kind of reminiscing on the old times and catching up. And I found the structure of this book to be very, very interesting in the way it was told. So we have a dual POV. So we follow Suchi as one POV and then Wen as our other POV. So we see their 2 views on their friendship with each other. But in terms of the timeline, it's not chronological. We don't jump back and forth. We actually get one timeline that goes from past to present and one timeline that goes from present to past. So it moves backwards. And I found that to be a really interesting way to tell the story. Some aspects of it were good for me and some weren't. I think the good parts are that like when these 2 timelines met in the middle, I think it gave us a really good kind of like, oh, this is what we've been building towards, like building towards this one moment that they like meet in the middle with each other in their timelines. That worked beautifully. What I don't think worked very well is that our backwards timeline was a little bit hard for me to connect to. I think because we were learning things about him in the sort of backwards way. A lot of the reveals we got later on in the book, like when we went back to his childhood, I think didn't hit as hard just because of like the way it was told. And so I don't really know if it was the story itself or if it's the way it was told, but I definitely connected more to her timeline, Suchi's timeline, over Wen's, our male character. But that being said, I think this was a really creative way to tell a story. I definitely see the vision in what Karissa Chen was trying to do. And what this book taught me this year is that not every book needs to be like so overly dramatic to be effective, to be good. Because I think I read a lot of really just like emotionally draining, very heavy, very kind of like shock factor type books, and I love them. I love feeling like very, very strong emotions, but this book taught me that you can feel these sort of like gentle emotions, get this slice of life type of story, and it can still impact you very greatly. So that's what Homeseeking gave me. Another historical fiction I loved this year was Broken Country by Clare Leslie Hall, a recent read. If you've been following along with Bookmas, you guys saw me read this in one of my blind book advent calendar challenge days. We're set in like the 50s to 60s in this one, in the English countryside. And we follow a couple very happily married, but they definitely have some secrets that they've sort of buried in the past, and the success of their relationship sort of relies on this stuff staying in the past. One day a dog starts like attacking their sheep, and so unfortunately they need to shoot the dog, which was very hard to read, but they had to shoot the dog. That dog happened to belong to an ex of our like wife character that we're following. And not only is this an ex, but this is like the first love, the one that got away, sort of the one that has like really never left her mind. And so as they reconnect, all of the stuff from the past starts coming up, and we interweave that with this sort of like murder mystery that's happening as well. What this one taught me this year is that books can really truly redeem themselves in the second half. As I was reading the first half of this book, I thought it was good. I think the writing throughout is very strong, very vivid imagery, very moody, very ominous. But in terms of the plot and a lot of the themes that we were exploring in the first half of the book, I felt like we were getting nothing new. I think the entire first half of the book was quite predictable. Like, as long as, like, once you read the plot synopsis, you could have predicted everything that happened in the first half. And I think we didn't really like dive deep into anything. And as a reader, I have this habit of like, if I don't enjoy the first half of a book, I will still continue to push through, but it will be very difficult for that book to convince me that it'll be above like a 3.5 star or something like that. Usually once I get to the halfway point, I've made my mind about the book and I'll continue to read it to finish it, but I usually don't end up loving that book. This book changed my mind on that. It really convinced me that the second half can bring it all together, because I ended up rating this like a 4.25, and the second half of this book was truly very, very, very strong. It tied everything together very well. So that's what Broken Country taught me this year. And then my number one historical fiction. This will come as no surprise to any of you. In fact, I have 2 copies of this book. Not because I bought 2 copies, but because I bought 1 copy and then the publisher sent me a second copy, which I am so grateful for because I love this book. But Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, genuinely like my top read of this year, or at least top 2 or top 3, like really, really high up there. I think everyone kind of knows the story of this one. If you don't, I would recommend going in blind, because that's kind of what I did. All you really need to know is that we follow a woman, Joan. She's currently working as a professor, and we're set in the 80s. And one day NASA announces that they're finally going to allow women to apply for this program and basically become the first women to step into space. And so Joan applies and we go along on this journey with her. And what I loved about this book is that, yes, it's a book about a character who loves space, but the book I don't think was actually about space. Like, that was just sort of our setting and our backdrop for creating this beautiful story on top. But this book, at the end of the day, I think was about love. Love in all forms, love for your friends, love for your family, love for like a romantic love. And what this book taught me is that I love just going into a book almost blind and getting just completely swept up in the story, in the way the author is telling you the story. Obviously, I read a lot of books a year, so a lot of the time I try and like research the books that I go into, because I'm trying to be a little bit more selective about the books that I read, obviously. But sometimes you can just trust an author to tell you a story. And I really discovered that this year with Taylor Jenkins Reid, and also honestly with Fredrik Backman. Like, I will trust those two with my entire life. Like, I actually prefer going into their books blind, not really knowing what to expect, and letting them tell me the story instead of letting a quick synopsis tell me the story and tell me what to expect. So this was all kinds of wonderful. Yeah, top read of the year, top historical fiction of the year. Okay, moving to mystery and thriller. I think I only really read like 3 or 4 mystery thrillers this year, so these are kind of like default options. But third place for me is going to be The Thrashers by Julie Soto. This is essentially like a Pretty Little Liars type of a mystery thriller. We're set in a high school. We're following a very like popular group of friends. They start getting these anonymous threats through text message, etc. And there's this sort of like mystery death case that took place at a prom. So very like high school thriller, quintessential high school thriller. I think this one taught me, honestly, that sometimes a 3-star read can be a good read. Sometimes that's all you want. Like, I feel like as readers, we're always searching for that next 5 stars, searching for that next feeling of like, yes, I read this like incredible book that I will never stop thinking about. But I think in between those 5-star reads, it's very good to have 3-star reads as well. I think there have been quite a few moments in my reading year in 2025 where I have just been craving a nice solid 3-star read. And like, I just want to enjoy. I don't need to read a masterpiece necessarily. I just want to read something and have fun. And so that was kind of The Thrashers for me. It was just kind of like fun. So that's my third place mystery thriller. In second place, I'm actually going to give this to Madwoman by Chelsea Bieker. This one definitely reads more of like a literary fiction mystery, I would say. It's not very thrillery, but this one follows a very troubled protagonist. So what's her name? Clove. We follow Clove. She has landed like the perfect life. She's married a very normal but perfect husband. She has 2 very normal but perfect kids. She lives in a very normal but perfect household. She just wants to be very, very regular. And as we go on through this book, through her point of view, so we're in her head for, I think, the whole book. Yeah, for the whole book. We start uncovering her past, her childhood. She had quite a turbulent childhood with an abusive father. And her life also starts to unravel when she one day receives a letter from a prison. And as she reads this letter, she starts feeling like threatened that all of her old secrets and her old past will come back out to haunt her, because at this point she's really hidden her past in her past. Even her husband doesn't really truly know where she came from, what her childhood was like, who her family is. And so that is Madwoman. And I think what this book taught me is that a book can feel very uncomfortable to read and can be a very unpleasant experience to read, but you can still get a lot out of it. This book I wouldn't say is fun to read at all. It did make me feel very uncomfortable a lot of the time. Our protagonist Clove is, I would say, quite an unlikable character, but I think it just gave me such a different perspective on life that I don't regret reading it. Like, it wasn't my favorite book in the world, but I'm still happy I read it, and I think I did still get quite a lot from this one. So that's Madwoman. And then in my first place for thriller, I don't actually have a physical copy, but it's going to be Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. I think it was a lot of fun. I think it had a really unique premise. So we follow Jet, who gets very violently attacked on the night of Halloween. She wakes up 2 days later in the hospital, and the doctors tell her she only has 1 week to live. And so Jet, being a very determined person, decides that she's going to try and figure out who did this to her before she dies. So basically she's trying to solve her own murder before she like actually succumbs to the murder, I guess you could say. And this was very interesting for me to read, I think, because it was a really fun thriller story first and foremost, but also I think just the emotions we went through with Jet were very unique. Like, I hadn't really read anything like that before, where we're following a character who is on one hand very quickly coming to face her like imminent death. Like, she's on one hand trying to come to terms with it, but then on the other hand she's just so determined to like solve her own murder, like to solve this crime that like has happened but hasn't come to fruition yet. I don't know, it was a really interesting story for me to read, and I think what this one taught me is thrillers can have emotional depth in them, because I think like a lot of the thrillers I've read in the past, I've kind of read for shock value, for thrill value, and this one like almost made me cry. Like, it made me tear up at certain points, and yeah, gave me like a different sort of a depth that I normally don't feel when I'm reading a thriller. So I enjoyed Not Quite Dead Yet. It was my favorite thriller of the year. We're moving over to romance. So for my top 3 romances, this has to be The Bodyguard by Katherine Center. I really enjoyed this one. In this one we follow Hannah, who is a bodyguard that looks more like a kindergarten teacher, I think she's described as. Yeah, she's this really petite person, and she has this kind of like sweet demeanor, but she's actually a really tough, fierce bodyguard. And she gets assigned to Jack, who is a really famous actor. A situation comes up where his mother is actually sick, and he needs to like go back to his childhood family home to help take care of his mother, to see her. But Jack doesn't want his mother to know that he has a bodyguard, because he doesn't want to stress her out. He doesn't want to like have to explain why he needs a bodyguard, and like because he has a stalker and everything. Like, he just doesn't want to stress out his mom in this time where his mom needs to be focused on healing. So he asks Hannah if she can pretend to be his girlfriend as her excuse of like why she's hanging around all the time, but like also in secret she's his bodyguard but his fake girlfriend. So we get into this fake dating situation. On top of all of that, both of our characters are dealing with a lot of issues of their own. They both struggle with boundaries, I think, like boundaries between forgiving someone but also like acknowledging that what they did was not okay. And I really loved how that was explored in this book with both of them in different ways. And so what this book taught me this year is that a cute book can hold a lot of emotions that aren't all cute. This book actually starts off quite sad. On our first page, our protagonist is actually at her mother's funeral. So there's a lot of things that our characters are dealing with. And I think it's just been a trend where a lot of these romance books that deal with sort of like sad subject matter at the same time are marketed as these really like joyful, cheerful, cute rom-coms. Like, you wouldn't look at this and think this is going to be a sad book. And I will say, this book in the end was not a sad book. There was a happy ending. I think there were a lot of fun rom-com elements to it, but there were a lot of moments in here that were quite emotional at the same time. So yeah, The Bodyguard helped me come to that realization this past year. In second place, I don't know if I want to take this book off the shelf. It's under so many things, but Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. Right here. You can see it, right? It's right here. Definitely my second favorite romance of this year. We follow a protagonist who gets this opportunity to maybe potentially write a book about this very elusive woman with a very interesting past. But when she arrives, she actually finds out that this woman is not only giving her a chance, but she's also giving another author a chance. So the two of them enter the situation where I think they have like 30 days as a trial run to hang out with this woman, start doing research, and then at the end of the 30 days, she will choose who actually gets to write her story. And so as our protagonist, I can't remember her name, as she and this other author spend time with this woman separately, but also like start running into each other in this small town, they get to know each other, and it's a romance book. So a romance forms. I don't think that's a spoiler. I think what this book taught me is that my idea of a really good romance book is very different from a lot of other people's idea of a very good romance book. I truly love a romance book that has a mix of contemporary fiction, just general fiction, with romance. I don't think I love a romance book where it's all just romance with barely anything else happening in the plot. And I think with this one, we definitely had more fiction versus romance. And I think a lot of people didn't love this book because of that, but I loved that about this book. And for some reason, when I get a romance subplot that's not the main focus, I tend to feel the chemistry between our characters more. And it definitely also has to do with the way it's actually done and the way it's written. But I find when a romance is like too in my face, I don't love it and I don't trust it. Like, I just don't understand it. But when there's a romance that is sort of just something happening in the background along with a plot, like it's kind of just supporting the plot as it goes on, that's when I love a romance. And that's what Great Big Beautiful Life did for me. So I loved it. And then my top romance read of the year, where is it? Where is it? It's over here. Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I'm obsessed with this book. It's so good. And this one, I think similar to the favorites, taught me that I can really love a trope that I normally wouldn't love as long as it's done well. Like, a truly good author can do any trope well, because this book is a walking pregnancy trope. The entire story is structured around our protagonist's pregnancy. So at the beginning of the book, what's her name? I always remember plot points in books, but I never remember names. Her name is Eve. Eve, at the beginning of the story, literally finds out she's pregnant. And not only that, but her pregnancy was the result of a one-night stand. And so she's trying to come to terms with this. She's trying to figure out like what to do. Should she tell this baby daddy? And so honestly, I don't want to say too much more about the story, but we follow her as she navigates through this pregnancy and tries to find like the best thing to do. She also actually has a friend throughout the story who has had pregnancy issues in the past. So there's this whole sort of like clashing subplot storyline with her friend there. And this book surprised me so much because like I had heard really good things about it, but I didn't think this would be my perfect like favorite romance just because it's so heavily pregnancy trope, but it was truly done so well. And like, it didn't even shy away from the whole pregnancy thing. Like, the entire book was structured through trimester. I think this book also converted me to Friends to Lovers, because previous to this, I was definitely very much an enemies to lovers reader, and this one convinced me that Friends to Lovers, if done right, can hit so hard. So yeah, this one gave me Friends to Lovers as a trope that I loved. That was Ready or Not, my favorite romance of the year. Let's get into romantasy, shall we? My third place romantasy is actually going to be a little bit of a basic pick. I think it has to be Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This was a January release, so it's a book that honestly, like, I don't really think about too much anymore now that we're at the end of the year, just because I've read so many books since then. But as I was going through my like reading list of this year and going through the romantasies, the adult romantasies, because there will be a YA category coming up, I just think like this series in general was truly the series that got me into romantasy in the first place. Like, Fourth Wing was, I think, genuinely my first adult romantasy that I ever read, and it just got me so hooked onto the genre. I think it just like, it has everything that you would want in a romantasy, and I think this has become one of those universes that like, no matter what happens in the story, I think I'm still going to at least somewhat enjoy it, just because I feel so attached to this world world. I love the dragon riders. I love the powers. I love our characters. I think it's mostly like the side characters that really started to shine in this one, like really did it for me. I also think this is romantasy done right, where the first book is so romantasy, like very heavy on the romance. But then as we moved on to Iron Flame and to Onyx Storm, we honestly got a little bit more into a high fantasy genre, in my opinion. Obviously, romance is still a big part of it just because of how we set up the entire story with Fourth Wing. But I think the amount that we've expanded on this fantasy world has really impressed me, especially for this being in the romantasy genre. I really enjoyed Onyx Storm. Again, like I think there were just so many side characters that were so fun to read in this one. I love the trajectory of the story. I'm really excited about book 4. And I think what the series has given me in general is like that feeling of being in a really big fandom. Like it's so much fun loving a book, loving a universe that so many other people love, so you can like discuss theories with people. Like people go into such deep dives into this world, and I think it's just so much fun being a part of that. Like we haven't felt something like this since the Twilight days or like the Hunger Games days, you know? Like it's just so much fun being in a part of a huge group of readers who love the same thing. So that's Onyx Storm. My second favorite romantasy of this year is actually right behind me. So Enchantra by Kaylie Smith. This one was a real surprise to me. I think what this taught me is that I can enjoy a spicy romantasy if it's done in the way I like, because this book and Phantasma, which is the first book in the series, they are both quite spicy books, and they are quite like dark romancy. I would say there are a lot of dark romance elements in them. So just like knowing myself, I know like I don't love a lot of dark romance. I don't love a lot of spice in books, but these two books, and especially Enchantra, really showed me like, hey, here's a dark romantasy that's spicy that you will have fun reading. I just really love these characters. I love the world. I think the premise of these books are really fun. In both of these, we are set at different houses, different manors, where a different type of a game is hosted. So in Phantasma, we have trials that are based on the Rings of Hell. And in this one, Enchantra, we have like an elaborate hide and seek game in a way, where each round has a different theme and different rules. And I just had so much fun reading this. There was something about the chemistry that really worked for me in this one. I love these characters. This one also had a lot of strong side characters that I'm hoping we follow more in the third book. I truly don't know anything about the third book in the series and what it will be about, because Phantasma followed one sister, Enchantra followed the other sister, and I don't know where we're gonna go from here. But wherever we go, I'm excited. So yeah, Enchantra taught me that I can love a spicy book. And then my number one romantasy of this year has to go to Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. This was so beautiful. Obviously, a very different book from Enchantra and Onyx Storm, but this is the Divine Rivals prequel. I don't think you necessarily need to read Divine Rivals before reading this one, because it is quite a different story, just set in the same world. But there are a few Easter eggs in this one that, like, if you read Divine Rivals first, you would just get those Easter eggs. Like you would just get a little bit more out of the experience. And what this one taught me is that Rebecca Ross can do no wrong. I think like Rebecca Ross has been slowly but surely building her way up to becoming like one of my favorite authors, because I loved the Divine Rivals duology. I loved the Letters of Enchantment. No, that is the Divine Rivals duology. What is the River Enchanted one's called? The Roots of The Elements of Cadence, that's what it is. That's A River Enchanted and A Fire Endless. I loved both of those duologies, but I think Wild Reverence really cemented to me like this is the perfect author. I think this was Rebecca Ross at her best. It had the perfect balance of like this beautiful, fantastical, like dreamlike world, but also with a compelling and exciting story and with characters that I absolutely love. I think she also taught me that I love an off-page romance. Like again, like similar to like when I was talking about my favorite romances of this year, I don't love an in-your-face romance. I love a romance that slowly builds in the background, and before you know it, you're obsessed with these two characters together and you can't really even explain why. They just have been written as individuals so well that they fit together so well. Like they've been written as characters that just mesh together so well, and you don't necessarily need to see them even interact that many times to get the romance feeling between them. You just need to know their individual personalities, and that alone will tell you like these two people are perfect for each other. And that's, I think, what the romance in this one was like for me. If you haven't read this book yet, you must. But yeah, my favorite romantasy of the year, for sure. We've just shifted a little bit to the right, but moving into favorite fantasies of the year. This category, like, I can't rank these books, okay? This is very difficult for me to do right now. Are you guys crooked? I can't tell if you're crooked or not. Anyways, in third place, no, I can't even say in third place. I feel like these are tied for second and third. We can't order these, okay? I think we need to go with Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee, the third book in the Greenbone saga. I don't even know how I can begin to describe this series and like the impact it's made on me. If you don't know what the Greenbone saga is, we follow two major clans that have control of the production and distribution of Jade. And Jade is a substance in this book that, you know, we have Jade in real life. But in this book, Jade has magical properties where certain people can wear Jade, and when they wear Jade, they get these like enhanced powers from it. And so throughout this trilogy, we just go on through this like really political story of like Jade production and land territory, like just like clan wars. We follow a large cast of characters over a long span of time, and this series has just done so many things for me. I think it taught me that fantasies can still surprise me. I think as a reader who reads so many books a year, there are so many books that I can just predict what's going to happen in them from page like 10. This series showed me that like some authors can still catch me by surprise, which I love. I think I've said this before, but this book is just filled with so many characters that will surprise you at every turn. They seem very stereotypical when you first meet them, but as you go on through the story and dig a little deeper and see their decisions and what they're doing, they really surprise you. And like, I think every single character in this book surprised me with the arc they went on. So yeah, this world, this series, a lot of these characters will be in my heart for a very, very long time. I want to say forever. And then I think tied with Jade Legacy is actually a book with a very similar premise and name, but goes on a very different path. So Red City by Marie Lu, which obviously has a very similar title to Jade City. And I think honestly, the setup of this world is also very similar to Jade City, but the stories are very different, I promise. In this one, we have a sort of similar world where we have an urban fantasy here. We follow two main clans as they battle over the resource of sand. I think it's called sand, right? I'm pretty sure. But yeah, it's another substance that sort of enhances you. So very similar setup there, but the direction of this book really branches off because we follow two main characters in this one who grow up as childhood friends. They could have maybe been more than that, but they both get swept up onto these different sides of these clans and realize that they are now basically enemies. So we go through the story as they are both forced to do these really horrible things to each other. And I think the way that we saw these two characters like struggle internally with what they were doing was really, really, really wonderful for me to read. It was really complex, the things they were thinking in their minds, and I absolutely loved that about this book. And I think what this book gave me is that it just really solidified my love for reading about complex characters that don't do the right thing, but you can still root for them. I don't really love reading about a perfect character anymore these days. Like sometimes it's fun as a nice like easy read, but like I love reading about a complex character where you want to like scream at them, where you're like, this is the wrong decision, but then they also know that it's the wrong decision, but they're just forced to do it because of other circumstances that are pushing them into these certain directions. I love seeing that in a book and seeing how that affects these characters internally. I loved Red City, definitely like my top 3 fantasies of this year. And then number 1 has to be the actual highest rated book on Goodreads. So Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. I don't think I need to elaborate anymore. I have a full reading vlog where I shared my entire experience reading this book with you guys. Just like the perfect quintessential fantasy. Like what you think of high fantasy, that is this book. So many great elements. I think it was wonderfully paced, even though it is a 1,300 page book. I think the pacing of it was really good. It didn't feel slow at any parts of the book. And I think what I loved about this was that like The Way of Kings, the first book, was a little bit intimidating because we were setting up this really, really like vast fantasy world. And in this one, we were able to like settle. We knew the world already. We were familiar with it. And even though we did expand quite a bit on the magic in this book, it was a lot, I don't know, nicer, easier to follow, and we could just really focus on our character arcs, our character development. And this was just so good. It was just so good. It was the perfect fantasy. I find no faults in this book in particular, which like, I love how I've really transformed my opinion on Brandon Sanderson this year, because I read a few of his books last year or early this year, and like none of them were perfect reads for me. I could see the merits in his story. I don't think I've hated any of his books, but he wasn't like living up to be that, like, you know, a lot of people describe him as like the best fantasy author of our generation. And like, I wasn't really feeling that until I got into the Stormlight Archive. Like, this series truly convinced me of his skill. And also what I learned about these is don't be afraid of a long book, because yes, these books are all absurdly long, but they don't actually feel that long to read because they're very, I would say they're quite simple to read. They're very vast, complex worlds, but the writing is very simple and easy to read, so it feels like it's going by quick. These books helped me get over my fear of a long book. Okay, we've shuffled over just a little bit again because we're going to talk about sci-fi. So this year I did start dabbling into sci-fi books, and so for our top three, number 3 has to be Recursion by Blake Crouch. This book I would describe as like Inception, but in a book. We follow Barry, who is a cop in New York City, and there's this weird phenomenon going through the city or the world where people are starting to get these memories that never happened. Like, they're starting to get these very vivid memories of like what happened in their childhood, things that just come from a complete different life. Like, we could have a person who starts getting these memories of a complete different family, like a different husband, different kids, but those memories feel so real. And so this phenomenon is starting to lead people to do very strange and kind of sinister things sometimes. So Barry starts investigating into this, and then we just like really spiral into this story of like memory, time, all sorts of things. And I think this book really kickstarted my fascination, I would say, with sci-fi. Prior to this, I hadn't really read too much sci-fi. I read Ready Player One like 10 years ago, and I remember really loving it, but didn't really read more sci-fi outside of that. And then last year, I know I read The Ministry of Time by Kaylie and Bradley, but honestly, to me, that reads more like a literary fiction with a sci-fi element. But I think this book was my first sci-fi book that I read and was like, yes, I can get into this as a genre. This is true sci-fi to me. Something that is like a plot that is really jump-started by technology and that starts leading to like the end of humanity, maybe like the end of humanity as we know it. To me, that is like the definition of sci-fi. And so I really loved this book. I do have more Blake Crouch on my TBR. This jump-started my love for reading sci-fi books this year. So that's what Recursion gave me. I also loved Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I think this is going in second place. It could be first place too, depending on what day you ask me. Another book that you go into quite blind, and I love that about it because we follow our protagonist as he wakes up on the first page. He wakes up on a spaceship, but he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know why he's in space. He doesn't know what he needs to do. So we follow him as he starts just like bumbling around, trying to figure out why he's in space by himself. And that's all you need to know about the story. But this one I think taught me, again, like solidified my love and interest for sci-fi, but also taught me that sci-fi doesn't have to be that serious and that intimidating, because this book, like throughout the entire book, we get this very comical storytelling because we're in the mind of Ryland Grace, our protagonist, who is just this like very sassy, funny, quirky character. And like the thoughts he has in his head are like maybe sometimes a little bit inappropriately funny for like this high stakes, intense situation that he is in. But at the same time adds this like other dimension of humor to this book that I think makes this book a lot more approachable for a non-sci-fi reader to get into and still enjoy. Because yes, there are quite a few like space facts, I guess you could say. There are a lot of like physics, formulas, and things that are a big component of this book, but you don't necessarily need to understand them to the last detail. As long as you get the general gist of what's happening, you can still follow the story, really love it, and yet those personalities really make the story interesting to read. So Project Hail Mary, wonderful read. So good. I'm so excited for the movie to come out in March as well. And then my top sci-fi of this year, Morningstar by Pierce Brown. This could also be tied with Golden Sun, but this series has really, I think, shaped my reading experience for this year. This, I think, combines your favorite elements of a fantasy dystopian story, but with space. So just gives it a whole other feel. And I think the way Pierce Brown does, again, secondary characters was so good. And yeah, I think this year I really learned that I love secondary characters. Honestly, more than main characters most of the time. Secondary characters really make or break a book for me, and the ones in this world are so good. They're so good. They also like guide our protagonist through things very well and are such like a formative part of how he develops as a character. These books are just so good. I love them. And I have the next 3 books in arc 2 of this series ready on my TBR, ready for me to read in the new year. So loved these. Let's talk about horror. You guys are really high up. I feel like I'm so short in this frame, but that's okay. I didn't read too much horror. Horror is not really a genre that I read a lot of, although it's a genre I want to get more into for next year. But I read 2 books that are categorized in the horror genre. So I guess in second place by default is Something Within the Walls by Daisy Pierce. I read this earlier in the year. In this one we follow a child psychologist who goes to see a 13-year-old girl who claims to be haunted by a witch. And so we get this classic case of, you know, people believing that like she's not actually haunted by a witch. She just needs this psychologist to see her and to diagnose her. But as we investigate, you know, things are a lot more paranormal than they seem, than people believe. This wasn't my favorite book in the world, but I think this book taught me that books can actually be scary because I had read thrillers in the past, but not really horror. And so thrillers, like, while they're very exciting for me to read, I've never actually felt scared by a thriller where like my body starts reacting, you know, the feeling when you're watching a movie and you genuinely get scared and want to like hide in a blanket. Like thrillers have never made me feel that way, but this book started making me feel that way, and it was like the first book that taught me like books can make you feel truly scared. And so that's what this book, I guess, gave me. But a horror book that I loved, and the only other one I read this year, is Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. We follow a very rage-filled character. He lives in a house that is owned by a reclusive billionaire that took him in when he was a kid. He has a lot of rules. He lives a very isolated life. He's very trapped in his room. He's not allowed to leave. And the rule that he must follow at all costs is that he can never be left alone with the grandson of this reclusive billionaire, because there was an incident when they were younger where they basically tried to kill each other. And so they're not really allowed to see each other, but one day at the beginning of the book, our reclusive billionaire character dies. And so this book turns into this mix of this inheritance story where we get all of these like relatives coming in trying to claim the house. And then we also get this murder mystery kind of a story because our protagonist Evander really thinks that our billionaire didn't die just for natural purposes. He thinks he was murdered. He thinks he was poisoned. And so we go in the story, we're set in this house that really feels alive, that is a character of its own pretty much. And what this book taught me is that horror can be a fun genre to read. It really opened my eyes up to the horror genre. It's never something that I reached towards. Like all of the like horror books I've read kind of border on horror fantasy. I would say this also sits on that border, but is definitely more horror than fantasy, at least for me, and has really convinced me like that I should try out, branch out, read some horror novels next year and see how I feel about the genre. That was Hazelthorn, my favorite horror out of the 2 that I've read. We're gonna move on to our debut category. So this can be books from any genre, but has to be by a debut author. So I've been saving some books from like other genre categories to put in this debut category and not repeat books. But in third place, this has to go to The Names by Florence Knapp. This is just such an interesting concept. I've talked about it quite a bit, but we follow 3 different alternate timelines where a mother names her son a different name. So depending on what she names him, we follow these 3 very different stories of like how that name shapes him and also how it affects the rest of the family in the years to come. It is a little bit of a generational story, and this book was so beautiful. It was beautiful, very sad, very sad. And I think as I was reading like a lot of Fredrik Backman this year, a lot of books that combine happy and sad together, or like funny and sad together, I started just thinking that like books that are all sad are not good. After reading something like A Little Life a couple years ago, when just reading sad books that give you no joy in them, I started to like write off those books in general. But I think The Names really convinced me that like a book can be really sad all the way through, but can still be so beautiful and so good to read. And so that's what The Names taught me this year. I would really recommend this one. Definitely like be in the mood though to read a sad one, like be ready, I guess. There are a few maybe little happy moments in this book, but overall the tone is very sad. A little bit bleak, but very beautifully written and so well done. In second place, I have Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck. I really love this book so much. I think when I first read it, I gave it a 4.5 star, but like as I've gone through the year, like the fact that I still think about this book to this day, like months and months after I read it, like I think it's showing me that I should have bumped this up to a 5-star because this really, I think, altered my reading taste this year. It really gave me the courage to like step out into more literary fiction, I think, step out into more experimental genres, because the way this is written is like, I wouldn't call this like a regular book. Every chapter is formatted slightly differently. Some chapters read more like, I guess, like a regular narrative book, but then some chapters read a little bit more like poetry. But all in all, this just comes together into this one beautiful, cohesive story with a lot of good messages in it. If you don't know the premise yet, I've talked about this book so much on this channel, but in one sentence, we follow a couple as they go through ups and downs as the husband starts turning into a shark. And it's so good. It's so good. I think this book really gave me the courage to branch out into different genres, different types, like, yeah, more experimental books. That's what Shark Heart gave me this year. I really want to reread that one, actually. But in first place for debut novel, this has to go to The Poet Empress by Chen. This is a debut fantasy. It feels slightly historical. We follow Layne, our protagonist, as she lives in a small village. Our kingdom, our world that we're in, is currently not doing very well. Famine has spread throughout the land. Our rulers don't seem to be very good rulers, and Layne will do anything she can to help her family, to help her village, and so she offers herself up to be a concubine of the current crown prince. And the current crown prince is actually very brutal, very cruel, and so she starts having to navigate these royal court politics, these concubine politics, but also try and figure out how to take this crown prince down from within. So she starts getting to know the royal family deeper, like very, very deeply, and she also has to start trying to learn the art of poetry magic to help her take down this kingdom. And this story is so good. It was another one of those books that kept me guessing until the end. I didn't know what was the right choice and what was the wrong choice up until the end. And even when we make that decision, like, you're still unsure of like, did we do the right thing? Because it's one of those books that has like, there's no right or wrong. Everything is just in between. And this book was just so beautifully written. So this actually comes out in January. I have been recommending this book for the past 2 months, like since I read it in November, but you need to read this book when it comes out next year. We can stay here and quickly talk about audiobooks. This was the year that I discovered audiobooks and really started to enjoy them. Previous to this year, I was not an audiobook listener at all. I didn't like them. They didn't work for me, but the way I settled more into audiobooks this year was actually using them for rereads. And so to talk about the 3, I guess, audiobook rereads that I loved the most this year. In third place, I think honestly, The Will of the Many by James Islington. I didn't love this audiobook, like the production of it or the narrator in particular, but what I loved about it, honestly, was that it helped me learn how to pronounce all of the fantasy names and words in this world. Pronunciations in The Will of the Many are just like especially difficult for me, I think. I can usually try and like bumble around and figure out names and how to say things as I go through fantasies, but there was something about the words and the terminology in this world that was really hard to grasp. So the audiobook really helped me with that. I also really loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Rereading this one through audio gave me such like a different immersive type of experience. Like when you're reading it, you go through the story at your own pace, I think, but like when you're listening to it and hearing this like narrator really like emote in your head, I think it sort of feed you the emotions, you get a different experience. And I think the narrator, Julia Whalen, who did the Addie LaRue audiobook, did a wonderful job. And then I have to shout out, I think I already mentioned them briefly, but I'm currently listening to the Red Rising audiobook, the graphic audio. So good. So good. This one has like sound effects, it's got music, it has a multicast. Our characters are like actually acting in it versus just like reading the lines. Like they are reading every single word in every sentence, but then in the background you'll hear like giggles or screams and stuff, and it's really like a really immersive experience. So yes, I am currently rereading Red Rising through the graphic audio, and it's so good. It's so good. Okay, I think we're just gonna plop down here for the last 2 categories. We have our YA categories remaining. So starting with our YA fantasy / sci-fi category. In third place, we have The Blood Trader by Lynette Noni. This is the 3rd book in the Prison Healer series. If you want to scratch that YA fantasy dystopian itch, these books will do it for you in the best, the most fun way possible. The series feels nostalgic in the best of ways, but also offers you twists and things that that feel fresh and also has the most wonderful cast of secondary characters as well. And what these books taught me is that YA can still hit. I think like after reading through the series, I realized I always want to have a YA series on the go. Like, yes, I read a lot of adult fantasy and love it. I've been reading more like fiction, have been loving it, but I feel like I always want to have some sort of a YA on the go because it's just so fun to go back to. It like reminds me of, you know, those years that I like discovered, not that I discovered reading through YA, I discovered reading through like middle grade or younger, but just the feeling, just like this nostalgic feeling of like loving a series and like something that's easy to read but gives you a fun story at the same time. I loved this. I always want to have a YA on the go. Another YA that I loved this year was Wisteria by Adeline Grace. This is the third book to the Belladonna series, and this, like, I always describe this series as Once Upon a Broken Heart but more gothic. It really gives those like whimsical Stephanie Garber vibes but with a gothic twist, and I absolutely love it. The first two books, Belladonna and Foxglove, follow a character and they're a little bit more like murder mystery vibes. And this third book actually follows our protagonist's cousin. So it has a very different feel compared to the first two books, but I loved it so much. And I think this book convinced me that like when you switch a character POV, like your main character POV, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes, like, you know, when you're reading a series, you love a character and then when you switch characters, it doesn't feel as good anymore, like the magic kind of gets lost. Wisteria taught me you can switch to another character POV as your main character and it can still hit. In fact, this is my favorite book of the series, so switching characters really, really worked for me in this one. Okay, so in first place, to no surprise, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I do not need to elaborate any further on this. Everyone's heard of this book at some point. We all know The Hunger Games. This just reminded me of how hard a prequel can hit, how well it can be done. I think this was the year of the prequels with this and Wild Reverence making it to like the top of their respective categories for me. Like, this was the year of the prequels and I have gained such an appreciation for reading a prequel, and yeah, I don't know. What more can I say? This was perfect. Oh my goodness, we are on our last category. I feel like I've been talking for so long. My voice is starting to feel hoarse, but to wrap it up with YA fiction, my top three of this year were The Academy by Ellen Hildebrand and Shelby Cunningham. I was honestly surprised to see this one nominated for top fiction in the Goodreads Choice Awards because this is a YA novel. And if there's a YA fiction category, why was this an adult? Something to think about. This was a really fun read for me. We follow students, teachers, staff members as they go through a year at this cozy boarding school called Tiffin Academy. We have a little bit of a Gossip Girl element in here. We have these toxic characters that we follow, but told to you in a very matter-of-fact way that makes it honestly more fun for me to read. I think this book delivered the Ellen Hildebrand that I always knew and loved from her Nantucket books, but added this like young twist because her daughter helped her co-write this book, and I think her daughter really helped her write younger POVs better. In her other books, I think her younger POVs always read too young, like younger than they were supposed to, and so I think Shelby's contribution to this book was wonderful, helping these like teenage-aged characters feel like actual teenagers. I think what did this one give me? It solidified my love for reading about food. Ellen Hildebrand is such a foodie, and you can see it through her books. She always describes food in the most wonderful ways. Like in her Nantucket books, she always highlights these Nantucket restaurants and their menu items, and the food always sounds so delicious in all of her books. And in this one, we have a chef character that like is a well-renowned chef but cooks for this boarding school, and throughout the book, we got these like actual menus, like printed out menus that were included in this book, and I can't seem to find one right now just flipping through, but like when I tell you, these menus made me so hungry while reading through this book. Loved this, enjoyed it. The Academy. In second place for YA fiction, I'm gonna give it to Fake Skating by Lynn Painter, which was such a surprise to me because like you guys know, I have been so dead set on not reading hockey romance or like sports romance in general, but especially hockey romance. And this one convinced me that hockey romances can be cute, and it's like not necessarily all about the hockey. This was a cute YA romance that I think captured the experience of being in high school while having social anxiety really well. I think this was a really, really cute read. It did catfish me a little bit because I thought this was going to be a skating romance and not a hockey romance, but this book taught me not all hockey romances are bad. Will I be expanding more into the hockey romance genre this year? not necessarily. I don't really feel the urge to read another one, but this one convinced me that I don't need to be scared of the genre as a whole. And then first place for YA fiction for me was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. In this one, we follow the Sinclair family. We follow one character of the Sinclair family, and they're basically this really rich family who owns this private island, and they vacation on this island every summer. We have a couple different generations going on. So we have like a grandfather character, we have his 3 daughters, and then we have the kids under those 3 daughters. And our protagonist is like one of the kids, like the youngest generation. It's a mystery book. So our protagonist has come through this traumatic accident that happened to her while on this island. She is suffering through some memory loss. So she's trying to recover some memories. And yeah, we just see this family uncover their past. And it's one of those stories where it's like you're following a rich family doing kind of like horrible things behind the scenes, but trying to maintain this image that they are perfect, that like everything is perfect, nothing bad ever goes on with their family. So it's one of those. It kind of gives me like Desperate Housewives vibes. I found this book to be really eerie to read. The writing style was really interesting. As we were following our protagonist, she feels emotions in a very strong way, but the way she described her emotions were very violent throughout this book. So at the beginning of the story, her dad leaves. This happens on like page 2. It's not a spoiler, but her dad leaves her mother and herself. And the way she describes like her dad leaving is like, she says, he shot me in the chest. And when I read that at the beginning of this book, I was like, wait, he shot you in the chest? Like, what is going on here? What kind of book is this? And then I realized it was more of like an emotional shooting in the chest. And then, yeah, throughout the entire book, like that just continues on as a theme. I found it very alluring. This whole book, it was very quick for me to read because I just felt so entranced in it. But my favorite YA fiction of this year also caught me with some plot twists at the end that I didn't predict. All that being said, that wraps up the last genre Goodreads Jaime Choice Awards that we're gonna talk about today. I'm not gonna go through like memoir, history, biography, nonfiction, just because I haven't really read those genres. I read like 1 or 2 memoirs this past year. I just don't have anything like too helpful to contribute in those categories. But that being said, those are my Jaime Choice Awards. And that wraps up Bookmas Day 11. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, let me know what your favorite books, like if you did your Choice Awards this year, what would be your top books in every single genre category? If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!